All right, no fancy intro. This is not a podcast. This is like a live event. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and/or Twitter. If you guys are watching live, this is Seth and Mike presenting the Power BI user group from Milwaukee. Tommy's not with us today. He's got like family and things, or he does something other than Power BI. I don't know what, but it's something else. So we're gonna kick off the Power BI user group. Hello and welcome. Seth, you want to give us a who's presenting tonight? Do you know?
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since we've been able to convince anyone in our
Yes.
user group to join us on the stage, as they say,
Yes.
to impart on us a bit of their knowledge. So we're super excited tonight today, this morning, this evening, wherever you are,
Exactly.
to have Mr. Arnold join us and share with us some how to improve our DAX skills.
All right.
And it's a great topic. Who doesn't love talking DAX on
Right.
on a Tuesday evening? So excited to have him with us, and excited to hear the presentation tonight for sure.
All right. We'll move it into a three screen section here. Kevin, welcome. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
No problem. So we were just discussing before the phone call. We were kind of reminiscing about what's going on in our world of Power BI. And so I guess as our little intro or opener tonight, we'll kind of talk about something has changed in the service. Something in September desktop has the connection strings or something like that's going on. So maybe Seth, you were explaining it. What your challenge was, kind of like today and yesterday, kind of figuring things out through the September release. Maybe you want to explain a little bit like what you were seeing and what there may be like a ticket or around this that in the service or in the community that someone's lighting up.
It was an interesting side conversation that we decided to pull into the mainstream here. We had some bizarre, like really long timings of some of our incremental refresh and big model refreshes that we were doing over the weekend.
Yep.
And one of my buddies that I work with here pointed out that there was an issue reported on the community around the September release related to SQL connections. So ironically enough, one of my major things I was trying to test out was a heavy lift related to accessing that data, and it just wasn't working. So maybe I revert to August. Apparently that will work, and give it another go. But that was like the one side issue I was having. And then I think, Kevin, you were bringing up some oddities you were seeing around deploying the same data set versus local. So we figured we'd mention it.
Yeah, I was having really an odd issue with the code. I had a dimension table I was assigning an index to using Power Query, and then reusing that table to push that index into my fact table, and things weren't linking up correctly. I ran the code on my desktop, did DAX queries, and found it was correct. Pushed it up to a workspace on a PPU SKU, worked correctly. Deployed it with deployment pipelines to a UAT on a premium capacity.
Yep.
And it wasn't.
Weird.
And backed it all out. I ended up moving the functionality to the SQL engine.
Sure.
Got it all fixed, but I couldn't report it because I couldn't reproduce it and have them. I couldn't take a day or two to have them look at it.
Sure. So I've noticed something else odd too. So one of the connections that I use, Steve Campbell's Hot Swap Connections, is an external tool that I use a lot. So the idea is I have a model and a thin report, and we actually did a user group on this I think a while ago, or a presentation around this, where I talk about how does a thin report work and how do you connect to a data model. So I can basically locally have a report model in one Power BI file and a thin report on my local machine, work together with those two files, and then I can publish the model to the service, and then I can rip out the connection on the thin report and repoint to the service so that I can use the service level connection. But for some reason, when I was just checking this like the last couple days when I was using that hot swap connection thing, when I would remove the connection from the thin report on my local machine to do local development, it gave me a new error. There was a new error that was around like, hey, your connection's not right. Do you want us to send an issue to the product team? I said, no, hit cancel. And then it says, do you want to fix it? And then when I hit edit, instead of just having the report load with no data connection, which is what I'm used to, Instead, it brought up a dialog box that says, this is a dialog box for analysis services. Enter your server connection. And it threw me off because it's not how I typically reconnect these reports. Like if it's already been connected to the service, powerbi.com, I would just reroute the connection. It just loads the report with no data connection, and then I would fix it. I would just reconnect to whatever I wanted. But now it's actually prompting me for a SQL Server connection, which I found quite interesting. And then what I found out I could do is if I'm in Power BI Premium, and this may have already been there all along, I don't know, but in Power BI Premium, I have an XMLA endpoint, and I can point that XMLA, the Power BI, it's like, I think it's Power BI / semicolon / whatever the domain name is of that endpoint. I can put that domain name directly in the analysis services connection box, and it just works. So it's simplified my design pattern because now I can have premium, or I can connect to analysis services through the XMLA endpoint through a Power BI desktop file, which I thought was previously not possible prior to September. And then if I want to do local model development, I click the connection settings and just change it to localhost. So it makes it from a development standpoint, I like this a lot because if I'm in premium, I get the XMLA endpoint, I can easily switch between service and desktop with a connection string. It's very easy now, what I really like. The downside is this was all new to me. I didn't know this was changing. I didn't know this was like different. So now that I've experienced this, I got to figure out, I'm actually asking around some Microsofties. I'm like, did you change something? What's going on here? And so I got some recommendations to go talk to someone over there at the Microsoft side to ask some more detailed questions. Like, what are you doing on the connection side of things? Because something's different here. Anyways, good intro. Just be aware your September release might have some long load times initially, I guess, is what the moral of that story is.
If you go back to August for a couple days, maybe come back.
Maybe it'll fix itself out.
Sounds like a new blog post coming, Mike.
Yeah, right.
Get it all out.
I'm all blogged out. I'm gonna kick Seth needs to write one here soon.
You could just give him the topic.
Yes, exactly.
I just all my good ideas just come out in the podcast. I'm spent.
Awesome. And with that, Kevin, we'll jump right into your demo. So you're going to talk to us a bit about DAX.do. And so let me cut over here to your video screen, and we'll do that. And then let's do this one. I think this will work. All right. So it's on you. We have your presentation screen up. You're good to go to rock and roll.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate you guys letting me be here today. Today we're going to talk about improving your DAX skills with DAX.do. So I've already been introduced. Get up to this slide. I am on LinkedIn if you want to join up with me there, or on Twitter if you want to abuse me on Twitter. I do tend to hang out there quite a bit.
Sure.
The company, you see, this is my Twitter icon over top of my shadow. So the little devil there giving me instructions, maybe.
There you go. Or an angel. It could be an angel too.
Could be the angel. The company that I work for is Expert Analytics. I'm a partner at the company. And we have a bunch of clients here in the Dallas area and other parts. Dallas is where we're located, and I focus from being in the boardroom, giving strategy, down to implementing reports. So it just depends on what is needed. All right, enough about me. That's not what you're here for. You want to hear about DAX.do. So what is it? Well, it's provided to us by the SQL BI team, and they call it a sandbox or a playground for producing DAX queries. And that last word is the key word in that sentence, queries. Because when we're working with Power BI, we're used to thinking about DAX and measures. And there's the definition for you about a measure, straight from Microsoft. And what we know that's very important about measures is the last part of that sentence is depending on the context, right? Because the context changes, we get different results. We know the measure runs multiple times within a query. Well, the query is a statement that returns a table. I think about it a lot like a SQL statement, right? So we're going to get a table back, and that's what Power BI desktop is, a visualization. That's what it's going to use to build its visual. But that's not the only place that queries are really used, right? So we know it's up in Power BI. We know we can get it through the performance analyzer. And if you haven't seen that before, I'll show you an example here in just a second.
Hey Kevin, real quick there for would you mind maximizing the screen on there? Some of the words are a little hard to see on the PowerPoint slide.
Sure.
Yeah, if you make that a little larger, we can get some people can see it a little bit better there. Yeah, perfect. All right, excellent.
That better?
Yeah, that works better. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem. So a lot of another big place that queries are utilized is paginated reports. I think you've been hearing a lot more about paginated reports. Now with the premium per user SKU that's out, it's opened that up to be available for a lot more people. It's one of the things that I've really liked lately. I've gotten into some very complex tables that my users wanted to be able to push out, unfortunately, to Excel. Yes, we all know that still happens. But you know, we had a harder time producing the table through a Power BI table report, right? We got into some of the things that have been talked about in the podcast before, where you run out of resources or it's very slow. You can write a pretty big query and optimize it against the data set and put it into a paginated report. So it's really important to know about queries for that. When you're doing calculated tables inside Power BI, it's basically a query, right? That's running, that's doing the calculation. And if you look at things like generating a date table, there's a standard pattern that I know SQL BI puts out, and you could see their DAX code. It's just a query. And so knowing how to handle that and change that is important. And what I learned along the way of producing this presentation, and I just kind of thought, well, geez, I bet you these guys have put all their data out there, is the SQL BI books and articles that they have, you could reproduce. I know I'll show you an example. Hopefully we'll have time to get to it. That I reproduced it from their book. And on a lot of their articles, they have a try it page, and we'll see it from their guide, DAX.guide. But their data set is already out there. And what's nice is you won't have to load up Power BI Desktop, take up resources on your machine to do it. So let's get a little bit deeper into that. So if you haven't seen a query before, this is what one looks like, right? In the black part of the screen. Easily seen, right? Because it says DAX Query, which comes right from the performance analyzer. So the visual on here is what produced this query from Power BI. And we're going to go through as we work with DAX.do, and we're going to try to reproduce the parts of this. I may or may not. We'll see where we end up if we produce the exact query. It'll be real close to it, but we'll go through and we'll look at the top end function. We'll look at the summarized column. We'll work treat.as into this, and we'll see how DAX.do could help us learn how to put these different parts together. Okay, so with that, let's just go. I'm going to bring this part back up because I'm going to flip back and forth to it. But let me get to my make this bigger. Actually, I'm going to end up making it smaller. Mike, you could tell me if there's problems. I'm going to want two screens on here.
Yeah, no problem. I'll kind of jump in here a little bit. We've maximized your screen so it's as large as it can go. So we'll let you know if you need to like dial the size up a little bit or down. I know you can kind of like zoom in, zoom out on the browser level too. So I'll let you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
So to get to DAX.do, that's the actual website name, DAX.do. And I'm opening it in a private window just so that you could see what happens when you open it for the first time. You're going to get this video playing with Marco there, explaining to you what DAX.do is. And it's got a lot of good information there. I'm going to cover a lot of it. So if you want to, you could go back and rewatch it at a later time. If you like to just hear it with an Italian accent rather than my accent, whatever that happens to be.
Always better with an Italian accent, I think.
Exactly. If you could do it as an Italian, do it that way, right?
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I did open this in my own private window is the changes you make around here, it's probably keeping some cookie or something. So the sizing and everything will be different. And so I wanted to show that. Here I have all these panels, and we'll cover what each one of these panels does here in a little bit. You have an advertisement for SQL BI's classes here, which if you haven't looked into, I recommend that you do. They're very, very good. But you could X out of this so you get more room within this pane. These windows are all resizable, so you could change things around. And like I said, it will stick around. In case you missed it, I just used this little chevron to change that, to show the video and hide it. These items in the toolbar will light up as we start doing different things. If you happen to find a bug, you can report a bug, and you could change from light to dark. I happen to like dark. And then there's other options that you could turn on and off. I tend to stick with all the defaults, but feel free to kind of play with this and let me know. All right. So the very first thing that we need to work with anytime, or need to understand anytime we're working with DAX, is what the data model looks like. And the data model is put into this pane on the left here. So they provide two data models, the Contoso data model and the DAX.guide data model. So you'll see this has a couple more tables in it. And we'll see when we go to DAX.guide, we will see how we could utilize that one. I tend to use the Contoso a whole lot, and I think they do a whole lot as well. So here they have all their different tables. You could click on any one of the tables, and then down below, you'll notice it's showing currency, and it's saying it's of a type table. And you could hit this chevron to expand it to understand more about that table.
Hey,
so
hey,
what
Kevin,
is that?
I'm
Yes,
gonna pause you right here. It's doing great. Everything's good. If you don't mind, it's a little bit harder to see some of the words on the screen still. So I don't know if I don't know if it's Chromium. I think you're using Edge. It looks like on your browser.
I'm using Edge.
I know on Chrome you can actually do like the Control plus sign and Control minus sign to kind of increase the size of the whole browser. Zoom in, zoom out. Wonder if you can zoom in just a couple notches here on the view here, just to make it a little bit larger. Yeah, the zoom. I think. Yeah. Oop. Maybe a little too much. Yeah, maybe one or two down from that one. Yeah, that there seems maybe one more up if you'd have. Is that okay?
That works for me.
Okay,
I can work with it.
I think that's
I started Zoom it as well, so maybe I'll try to get some of that in.
Okay, yeah. No worries, no worries. I think this is a little easier for us to see on the video, so this is perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that makes sense. I thought about that right when you stopped.
No worries.
Okay, so so you click on a table, and then down below it, you'll start getting information about that table. So we see it has 28 rows, 3 columns, and it tells us its type, which is a dimension, which is good to see. We also have these icons that give us a hint of what's going on these tables, and these should be very familiar to you. So we could see sales has a different icon. We'll click on that, and we see that it's a fact table. It's got 100,000 plus rows, and we see it has some folders underneath here for relationships. If we expand that out, let me bring this window out some more. We could see what the relationships are on the sales table to the other dimension tables. So we have 3 relationships to the date table. So one of them is going to be active and the rest will be inactive. We know that just from our modeling. And but we, this doesn't tell us exactly which ones are set up that way. So one easier way to understand this database is to hit the view diagram, and that's going to open up in another tab. And now we could see, again, we have 3 relationships, and we could see to due date, and well, that's the due date. If I can get my mouse working, I guess it's off just a little bit. Order date, I think, is active. Due date, and I'm not getting this one to. Delivery date, it was the middle one. I couldn't get it to come up. Sorry about that. Delivery date's inactive, due date's inactive, and order date is active. But this is, a nice way you can move things around. It will, if you like it in a different manner, it will remember this for you. The other thing is if you're back on this tab and you switch on the model and you go back to the diagram view, it synchronizes between your two tabs. So if you do have enough space, you can leave it open on one monitor, and it always puts the color groups right in the middle for me. You could keep it on one monitor, and you could have the diagram and your model and your work area all at the same time. So that's a neat little feature. We'll go back to Contoso. If we look over here and we look at currency itself, it'll tell us a little bit more about that column. Especially, this is what I like about what the minimum values and the maximum values, how many distinct values it has, and what the data type is. You could also have this little context menu come up and show hidden metrics, and now you'll notice that the key shows up. And that was hidden, and it shows this key has relationships. And when we click on that, again, down in this informational box, it shows us what the relationships are. So you take some time to get to understand your model through all of this, which of course is very important. Okay, but what I told you is that we were going to be here to write DAX queries. And so far I haven't done that. So let's fix that. All right. So a DAX query starts out with evaluate, right? And let's see, I think I could switch over. All right, if we look at this, we're going to work kind of the bottom up of this query. Well, let's ignore the order by for now, but you see it has the evaluate, and it's using a variable, and it's evaluate. We don't have any of that defined out yet. So let's start with evaluate, and you see it has, I don't think they call it IntelliSense. I think they call it autocomplete because I think somebody has trademarked IntelliSense. So
I believe that's correct. I think IntelliSense is someone else has already figured that out. So you can't call it that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to mention who I heard has that. So
we'll just assume someone owns it.
Yes, somebody very powerful. All right. So when we're writing code into a new language, me from my old developer standpoint and everything, the first thing I always like to do is kind of like a hello world. So let's write a hello world using DAX, right? I'm actually going to write it as a hello DAX. Now remember what we were saying is the evaluate has to return a table. So if I just give a string of hello DAX, well, that's not really a table. But we could turn anything into a table using curly brackets within DAX. So now that's telling DAX here to take this as a table, and it's going to be a single row, single column table. And any DAX that's going to work successfully first has to be formatted. So we could format it, which helps me show that these items on the toolbar has now become active because I have text down here. So we could format it, which just calls their DAX formatter. We could run it. We could run the line. If I select it, I could run just a selection. So let's go ahead and run this. And we get our one row value, our one row table with the header of value and our hello DAX. That's going to be down in our result area. We also have a query history at the bottom. So if you wanted to go back and go, what was it that I did? What did I change? You have all this history down here. So that's good. That's good to have. One of the things I want to show kind of right away is that you could share the DAX that you produce with here. So let's say you have a bet with dinner on it or something like that, and you say, I want to show that I can just write a string and make it a table, right? And somebody doesn't believe you, I could now save and share my code. So they're first going to tell us what their policy is, and it's going to give me two links, a public link and a private link for editing. And Mike, we didn't kind of cover this ahead of time. I was going to send some links out. Let me see if I could bring my other window back up. I could give you the link to
most definitely. You can for sure send that link on over, and I'll put in the chat window, and I will zoom it out to all the social media things.
Will do. I'm just trying to.
Yep, take your time.
Toggle my chat. Okay, so I'm going to pass this one over first, which is the actual DAX code that I just wrote.
Awesome. I'll push that. Yep, I got it, and I'll push it out.
Nothing fancy, right? But you guys got to get the idea. You could see that it is possible, and then now when you win your bet, you could get your steak dinner somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I hope.
You hope. But what I do want to share out is I have for those of you that are want to kind of get ahead. I saved a bunch of queries out there, and you're welcome to work on them. I'm going to work through as many as we can with the time that we have. And so, Mike, if you send that link out, that's to a bookmark site that I have.
Awesome. I got it. I'll pass that out too.
Okay. All right. So now we know, success. We know we can write a query. We're doing so much better, right? So let's go back and figure out what is it that we want to look at first. So like I said, we're going to work bottom up. So this variable, primary windowed, is here, and it's using the top N. So let's figure out what top N does, right? Because let's say I don't really know anything about this. So I'm going to go top N. And what I love about this is you can see right here in line, it starts telling me what is it that I need to pass to, or what I can pass to the top N function. So I could give it an N value, the table, and all that, but still, that doesn't give me enough. I don't know what N value means. If I click on the word, this is like my favorite part here. They link this all into DAX.guide, and if you haven't seen DAX.guide, I strongly urge you to look at this. I like this better than the Microsoft documentation.
100%. I would agree with you there.
Yeah. So again, you could page through it. We have what the syntax is. Oh, N value is the number of rows to return. Okay. The table is the expression, the tape that I want for it to be returned upon. Order is, these things are optional and repeatable. Okay. So, let's say that I still want to get just a little bit more information. They link to the actual page down below. So now open up that page once it loads, and we get even more information. And if I wasn't in a private window, this upper corner would have a video. They have put out videos for pretty much every function so far. So again, how to learn DAX? Come out here and use this. Watch their videos, page through it, and then they have examples. And this is what I love too, is here it is try it. So you hit try it, it brings us right back to DAX.do again. You'll see it changed me into the DAX guide data model. It gives the same result set that it had in the DAX.do, right? So I don't have to run it. I mean, I can run it again. I'll click run. I'll see that I get the same exact result set. But, we're here to learn. So what's what can I actually try to learn a little bit more from this? Well, let me think about, I got it in from descending. So I got the top three. What if I want the bottom three? And, I'm just going to kind of guess. And maybe what I need to do is change this to ascending, right? So I could do that here. And again, I got my IntelliSense, but let's kind of walk through what's happening in here. So we knew this was our N value. Let's bring up our little cheat sheet again. So we're going to get 3 rows. This part is the table, so it's the second parameter. The table is being done by an add columns off of a values function. So it's getting the values for product name, and it's adding the column sales amount and using an @ sales amount naming standard. The SQL BI guys have an article. I don't have it off the top of my head, but they have an article on why they use certain names. I'd recommend that you read that. And it really helps understand what you're using at what part inside your DAX. That's something I need to keep improving myself on. I'm not consistent on it, but it is a good naming standard. So it's adding the sales amount measure. And I know this is a measure because I could come over here to our table and see sales amount, and it's got the little measure icon next to it, right? I could click on it and see a little bit more about it down at the bottom here, that it's a measure and returning a double. Okay, so I got a table, and it's going to be, get top end back up here. What my order by expression is going to be at sales amount, so it's the column in that table. And I just changed this to ascending to try to get it to be the bottom three. If I had, well, I got you guys on the line. What do you guys think? You guys are DAX experts. Is this going to give me the results that I want?
DAX experts. I'm gonna laugh at you there.
So I'll give you a hint because I'm asking the question. It probably isn't, right? But let's run it and see what happens. So I got 282 rows rather than 3. Why is that? Well, if you notice, the sales amount on all of them is blank. So if we read through that article a little bit more, or the DAX, the DAX guide, and also, like I was saying, is they also have links to their related articles on here. I know that I've seen it before where they talked about the behavior of ties. And so these are all ties. That's why I'm getting all of this. So, okay, I kind of have an idea what I could do. I know I should probably change my table. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a filter on my table. Again, my first expression is the table itself. So I'm going to let that go through from my add columns. And I'm going to add a filter condition that just says bracket at sales amount. And I got to allow it to do it. And I want to say when it's not blank. Well, I don't really have a function, or I can't just say equal blank. I don't think that's going to work. I do happen to know that there is a function of is blank, right? And again, just the autocomplete helps me find that. So I could say is blank and give it the value, but I want to have it when it's not in blank. So sometimes I guess I could just start typing, is there a not function? Yeah, there is. And again, anytime where I'm unsure, if I grab the function, changes false to true, true to false. Just come over here, read your documentation. You don't have to keep moving all over the place with it. Check my parentheses here. I think I need one more. And this is always my scary part, because if I miss something and I click format, because what did I say? No DAX code will run unless it's formatted. Well, it won't run correctly. And I missed something. So I get what looks to be like this big scary box. It's telling me I have a syntax error somewhere. And what I'm going to do is cheat a little bit and go over to what I already had produced.
So this, I find this incredibly interesting because I do a lot of DAX development, but the things that I lack in desktop are things that are exactly here. For example, it'd be nice to click on a measure or a calculation and say, hey, where is my missing, like the error coding here is better. There's articles about this, and the examples that come off of DAX.guide are really well done, and it's not like a little piddly example. It's like a robust example of using that function, and there may be 3 or 4 or 5 other examples that are just code examples of what's going on, and those code examples are just way better than I see on the Microsoft documentation. This is honestly, they've done a great job of really explaining to the user like what is happening and how to understand what the DAX engine is doing.
Yeah. And again, what I really think of, and you know, if you've had a coding background or whatever, you've seen this in a lot of other areas. It's not only just learning like the very high level syntax of it, but it's learning what all the functions do,
Yeah.
or in object language, what the different, you know, methods and everything. And once you learn those things, that's really the coding part. Well, DAX is no different.
Yes.
It's learning what all these functions really can do for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I could format because I cheated and cut and paste. I could click run. And there we go. We got 3 values because we took all the blanks out. Hey, we're learning. We're getting a whole lot better. Okay, now let's say if we wanted to just sort that, we got the smallest at the bottom and the highest at the top. Well, we know we have this order by here. And again, we could just change this part, run this again, and we could see that it's sorted the way that we want. So now we could take this concept, right? You're not going to take your exact code because your model may or may not look this way. You're probably not coding against the DAX.guide model in your reports or even the Contoso model. But conceptually, you could understand what you need to do in your measures or in your queries if you're working with paginated reports. Or again, you know, as we're debugging what's going on in performance, what's happening. So now we understand this top end query a whole lot more. So let's move on and see if we could start figuring out what summarized columns looks like.
Can I pick on you for one question around the DAX code that you just wrote? Before you move on, I just want to so I think there's something interesting here that's happening in this DAX code. And this is, I think, comes from Marco and Alberto's language of how they're creating this thing. One thing I didn't understand, again, when I was learning DAX was inside this filter context, you're basically building an add columns values. So add columns and values is making a table, and then you have the red text there that says at sales amount. And I think the reason they're using the at symbol is because this is an intra measure calculation, or this is a DAX measure only, so it only resides in this statement. And the at symbol denotes that this is the name of a column. You know, there's a column called sales amount, and you could, I think, I mean, realistically here, you could drop the at sign on sales amount, or you could underscore table, like whatever you wanted to do here. But there's a virtual table being made in memory while this is running, and I think it's very interesting to point out here. The at sales amount works very well as you look at like the is not blank, because now you're doing a filter on top of the virtual table that was made, and you're now filtering on this new column called at sales amount. So I think this is one of the core things that got me tripped up a lot when I was learning DAX. Was there's this concept of building these in table memory only things, or specific to a single DAX measure. There's a table being made in the memory, and you can actually call off columns of those tables. There's a whole litany of other articles around how to do this and how to do it appropriately, but their pattern is use add columns, add the values, and then use an at symbol or something along those lines to delineate which columns, because you could make another column in here by adding another measure behind this with another at symbol, at, you know, unit count or unit total or whatever, other things as well. And then because of that, you can now call that column name in other places in your measure, which I think is really cool.
Right. And then there's the whole concept of lineage, and then knowing what's in there. So that helps you, I'll find that article and I'll add it to that Toby link.
Yeah.
The Get Toby, because they do a whole lot to explain why they name things certain ways.
Yes.
And I actually got into that with a paginated report that I had to update today.
Nice.
Where a column had lineage, but something I was joining to didn't have lineage. So I had to remove the lineage, and I had to write the function a certain way to do that because it wouldn't do my join condition.
Very cool.
So yeah, you got to understand all of those. But you kind of brought up a good point that I'd like to kind of cover.
Yeah.
Right. Is, you know, so we have multiple places that tables are being built here.
That's true. Values
right here is building a table, and you see I could just select that and run the selection. I thought I could. Oh, because I don't have the evaluate in front of it.
You'd have to make a new tab for that one.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. Like I could copy that down.
That's true. You could go below it.
And you could have in your statement multiple evaluates. We're going to cover this a little bit later, but we brought it up. Oops, we didn't want that whole thing, so let's just do this. We're going to evaluate just this part. And then we're going to evaluate this part. So we could understand even a little bit more.
I like what you're doing here. I think this
what these queries have done. So I think this is going to run.
Oh, you're running them all into. Okay, you're running it all together. Okay, I see what you're doing.
You could run all of them together. So and it shows in order, right, of what I had in my statements up here, which is a little bit backwards, right?
Yeah.
But if we want to look at, here's the 2,517 rows from product, and if we look at product here, I'm willing to bet we got the same number of rows right here in their table.
Yep.
So we're getting a product name for every row, and that's the first table that's being built in this query, in this part of the query. So there's a table. Then to that table, we're adding a column to it. And so that comes out looking like this.
See, this is the stuff I missed. When I was building DAX the first time, I got so lost when I started creating variables with tables in them. I'm like, what the heck am I doing? And there's your blank values. You got some blanks sitting around there.
Right.
So, yeah. So you've even got, what you were saying earlier, by filtering out the blank values. Now you can go through and say, okay, now you can even go further and say, okay, let's filter, and you can kind of walk yourself through the individual steps and see the data changing as you do each step, which is something you just can't see in desktop.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Once you learn how to write queries, the debugging of all of that, to me, just becomes a whole lot easier. And that's why you may not come here and do your queries, right? You may use DAX Studio or something like that, because the evaluate this type of, putting multiples in, DAX Studio does the exact same thing. It just, you're not going to have the nice little helper window to the side. And what I like about coming to here to learn something about a new function is I'm not worried about what the data model looks like, or did I put my data model together correctly.
Good point.
I know they put it together correctly. I mean,
yes,
there's no question about that.
Exactly.
Okay. So great. So now let's start. I'm going to actually use my clear button up here, and I'm going to clear all. So now I just started something brand new. And we're going to try to see if we can figure out this summarize columns. So I'm going to start with my evaluate and start typing, and I get my completion, and I get my helper, which I do like this. If you already kind of know it, I know I need to give a group by column, and this could be repeated. Filter tables can be repeated. Then I have to give it a name and whatever the expression is. And again, if I bring it up over here, this gives me a lot more detail about it. Okay, so I'm going to try to build this a little bit more by hand. So we want to bring in something like calendar month and calendar month number. We want to have, it is doing a filter. And so I think at the same time, we'll learn a little bit more about this treat as, and it's doing a filter for year 2018 off of the calendar table. And then this last part is this expression, the name and the expression. So we have a name that, in this case, it's saying total unit price, and it's bringing over sales order lines, total unit price. Now, not all of these exist exactly in this. I'm going to go back to Contoso, but we'll use everything the best that we can. So let's look at date, and we're going to look at year or calendar, and we're going to bring over, we had month. So let's bring over month from this. And if I wanted to understand what was in month, I can do a preview data, and it's going to populate this already in here. So I could see that is probably the values that I want. It's the month name. I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Give myself a comma. Month number, right? Because that's going to be for my sorting. And then in the other query, we had a filter table. So we'll hold off on that in just a little bit. But first, what I want to be able to do is bring in my expression, right? I want to go back, kind of build up. We'll come back to the filter table. So I'm going to bring in a measure and give that measure a name. And you can see I didn't use the same naming standard as they did. Maybe we could try to do that here. But let's find a measure that we have. We could just use gross amount. So we'll call it at gross amount is just going to be, and we're seeing we're getting more. Well, it was coming up earlier. There we go. Gross amount, just by typing that, fills in. Close my parentheses, and it shows that it matches up. And I'm going to format it. So that's great. Let me go ahead and run it and see what I get. I get a set of values. They're different. They all look pretty high. And that's because I haven't filtered down for a single year yet. So in this Power BI query, that's done using this treat as. So it becomes a filter and a filter table. So this is, I like this syntax. I use this a whole lot now too. I write filter tables. If I'm doing a treat as, I put it into a variable. And what you see is you have to define the first section for your variables. So let's go ahead and do that. If I can get my screen changing correctly. There we go. A little bit off on my tab. My tab game is off tonight. So we just say define is it's a section. It's kind of how I think of it. I have the define section where I could define measures, variables. That's usually going to be it. There's other things I think you can do within that. And then evaluate is going to be the query part of it. So I'm going to define a variable, not variable P, just var. And I'll call it filter table. This is one thing that's kind of interesting is because of their highlighting. When I use the words filter or table, they will color it. It's not really a keyword there, but okay. And this had treat as. So what does treat as do for us? Well, we give it an expression and a column name. And again, you know, I'll harp on this a couple times. We could just come over here and we could start reading what treat as does. Treat as is a very powerful function to kind of help you produce, I've heard it say virtual relationships, right? So I want to filter out the year on the date table. And so I'm going to do on calendar year. And again, looking down at the bottom here, it shows me my min value and my max value, which in this case is very important. They put their model together with CY in it. So remember earlier we said we could do a treat, make something a table of a single value as a table. So I'm going to make a table and I'm going to call it CY 2007. Hopefully that's low enough that there's data in their database for that. If not, we'll debug it a different way. So now that's done. So I need to give it the column name, and you see it does highlight down here as, right, because my comma came up. So it had expression before, and now I'm up at my column name. I want the value of CY 2007 to be treated as the value selected for my calendar year. And all filters are tables, right? So that's why we end up naming it a filter table. And now we could just add this in the proper area here with the proper comma, and we will format to make sure we have everything correct. We'll do our run, and we got much smaller values. this is probably what we want, right? So now we learned everything we need if we wanted to put together this whole query, right? We could see that we already did the treat as. We know how to do the summarized columns now. That's this DS0 core, I love their naming, by the way, goes into primary window, which is just the top end, bringing in that table. And it's going to be the top off of the calendar month number and what their sorting is. And then their evaluate is simply just saying, use that variable. We got it. We really understand it now, right? So there's a fast way of learning that. So what else can we do here, right? Because as I said, there's some other activities or other ways to learn. Mike, I'll go ahead and stop. I don't know if we're getting any comments or things from.
We haven't got any comments. There was a couple people when you were making the DAX code, you were coding from the hip. Dan Miser was pointing out there was a missing close the filter at the end of a bracket at the end of the filter context. So he was trying to help you out there with some of the coding piece because he could see it right away. So it was awesome. But no other questions. We're good to go. Keep cruising.
Okay. So what I'm going to go to is in that link that I had Mike send out earlier. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to open it all up because one of the main things that we always need to think about with DAX is context transition. And so I got another quiz for you guys coming up again.
I'm going to kick this one over to Seth. Make sure he answers this one.
I'm just trying to make sure you guys are awake, right?
I punted on the last one because I was nervous. I didn't want to get it wrong. I just.
All right, so this was the one titled Add Columns versus Summarize Columns in the link that was sent out. So again, we see we have our define section. In this case, I'm producing my own measure up here. So it's a very simple syntax language. That doesn't come up over here for some reason, where sum does. We know what sum does pretty easily. We've already covered top N. And we covered add columns earlier. So we're going to go off of color groups. And we have 3 ways that we're going to try to get the same value. Using add columns, we have an inline sales, right? So we have some sales of net price, which is exactly what our measure has. We could have the measure, or we could use calculate to do transition and do the same exact expression. What do you guys think is going to happen here? I guess Seth, he threw it at you. Will we get the same values? Will this all work out exactly the same?
Yeah, totally work out.
I think the calculate statement is doing the context transition. So before you share the answer, I'm going to give my guess here. I think the first two should give you. Well, hold on just a second. If it's sum inside there, there's a context transition happening when you have an external reference measure. So when you reference a measure somewhere else, that changes how things behave as well. So you might get the inline and measure sales might be the same, but the calculate sales might be different. And I'm liking to believe here, if we're doing the calculate sum of net sales price, you're context transitioning. So you'd have one of them, I'm not sure which one it is, will have the total sum of all sales for every single row. It'll be like repeated every single row. And then the other two, I think, will give you like the individual line item sum of sales. I can't remember which is which, but I'm guessing that line 9 will actually do sum of sales, and that'll give you the context of color groups, and it'll apply a sum of each of the color groups inside that. The latter two, I'm not sure. They may be something different. I might have it backwards though. How wrong am I? Let's see. The reveal.
Conceptually, you were right there, but the way that it worked,
I had it the other way around. Okay.
You had it the other way around.
Yep.
Right. So with this function, the add columns function, in this statement, the context transition isn't occurring.
That's right.
So we just get the same value all the way through. But when you use a measure,
reference somewhere else. Yeah, that's what I was. Yep.
When it's defined somewhere else, implicitly, rather than an explicit measure.
Yep. Yeah.
Implicitly, there is a calculate that wraps around it.
Yes, that's why, because when you reference them externally, it just auto applies the calculate to that measure for you, which then does give you the context transition.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's why if you're ever doing work in Power BI desktop and you have a table and you're trying to add a calculated column to that table, I can't say that I've actually run the debug, but my suspicion is it's using add columns.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've had it to where I go, oh, wait, I keep forgetting I got to put this expression in a calculate to get the correct value.
Yep.
But if I used a measure that I already defined, I was getting the correct value. So here's a good example of, again, using this to learn context transition. I believe it is also covered in their article on this. But now what we've seen a lot of times, especially in Power BI and what we just kind of walked through, is we don't have the exact same columns here, but summarized columns, we'll put the exact same 3 statements, expressions after that. So now with this, because summarized columns works differently, when we look at the answer,
I was going to say
it's
this
right all 3 times.
I was going to say this one I think does do it all the same 3 times. It's going to be the same calculation no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's because of the way summarized columns work. I came across that, I want to say, in either one of their DAX.guide videos or their articles, right? I mean, obviously we all listen to these guys quite a bit.
Yep.
But they talked about how this does do, it forces the context transition for you to where add columns does not.
I feel like I remember hearing some guidance around, and this may have been correct or not on one of the articles, was they recommend use summarize columns versus add columns periodically depending on what you're doing for this very reason.
Yeah, but I think there's also some restrictions for summarized columns. Let's see if I could find it on their documentation.
I think you're right, because
there's times where in a measure,
yeah,
you cannot use summarized columns.
And I think it was something like if you have relative security or something attached, or there was like some kind of weird like a use relationship that's inactive or something weird that happens that there's some edge cases that it doesn't do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you have to either go back to something like a calculate table.
Yep.
Or, other type of things. But I know I've kind of run into that before, which is also why I wanted to show that,
that's a good example.
If you're over here and you're just running these evaluate statements, but then you turn around and cut and paste and put this into a measure, it might not work the same. And I think in some of their either unplugged videos or other videos I caught where they tested it this way, but then they wrote it up in their measure when they were moving it to what they were trying to accomplish. They did something different. So
yeah, there we go. So their article and their related articles, I'm looking at it right now. It says introducing summarized columns. This article explains how to use summarized columns, which is a replacement of summarize and does not require the use of add columns to attain good performance. That's probably, I think, the article that I think they're referring to. And then they go through in detail. I'm scanning through here really quickly. Filter table and summarize columns.
Here's that.
Yeah.
Sorry, here's the article on naming temporary columns in DAX that we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. This one's a good one too. Oh, there's so much good stuff on their
so
site.
You got that. You could put that link out for everybody.
I will. I'll go grab those. I'll snag that one right now. It's just their library of stuff is just getting better and better, and it's getting richer and richer as we go.
And it's amazing just how much they give away for free. So I see we're at the top of the hour. We could I got more examples we could go through if you want.
I think we're fun to go through. I mean, I'm getting some tenacious data saying this is dynamite stuff. They're loving the teaching of the tools and the approach. Honestly, I would say, Kevin, if you got another example, if you got the time, I mean, we're going to be here for another hour at happy hour. I'd rather have a shorter happy hour. This is amazing. You're doing a great job presenting this. Let's keep going. Let's do another one.
Yeah. I got all night, so
okay, sounds good.
Well, we have other pugs too. We can continue on with this.
Exactly. This is really good, and I think more of this is in order because so that has been my hardest kind of part of learning DAX is when is it filter context transitioning, how to know when it's going to do it, and then like how do I, you know, I know it's happening, but sometimes I can't always put my thumb on like what is the right solution, like what do I need to change to get the filter context transition happening the way I want it to, because I know what I want to calculate. It's just sometimes that transition's happening in a weird way where I can't always get my hands around it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go through 3 different examples. I'll pull them up.
Okay.
But what you want to do now is go get your book.
Oh, yes. Nice.
Go get it and open up the page 132, because this is where I took this from.
Okay.
Okay. Because this is where I wanted to go. You know, what if I'm casually reading that book, you know, to wake myself up in the morning?
Sure,
you know,
sure.
Or put myself to sleep, one of the two.
Yeah.
You know, but do I need to fire up their Power BI desktop examples, or can I just come out here and start writing it?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I did one day. I just came out and I wrote exactly what was in the book. So this one is coming from figure 517.
Awesome.
And if we look at it, they're defining a measure. And in the book, what they actually only have is this measure defined. And then they return a table that's coming out of a Power BI visual. So I just kind of made it up. I go, well, this must be what they're doing in the table. And because, right, we already learned summarized columns. We're masters at that now.
Yes.
So, okay, so what they wanted to talk about here in this part of the book is, again, some of the changing the filter context and how you could do some things and you could get incorrect results and you may or may not realize it, but what also this walks through what was done incorrectly. Then the next example I'll show applies a filter, puts a filter back on. And then the last one does the exact same thing, but uses the all selected function. So if we look at this, when this code ran, and this is one of the things that they do to make this this architecture run so fast, is they cache everything. So all of these queries are saved in cache. In fact, almost forgot to mention, if you want to know more about the platform itself, how it was architected and put together, Marco did a sit-down live stream with Reed Havens, and he got deep into what the back end looked like and everything. So if you want to know that part of it, go ahead and watch that. The question a lot of times that I get giving this is, can I connect it to my own data source?
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
answer is no.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's all within their architecture.
Yes.
But he talks about what they did enough that if you know enough of it, maybe you could kind of put your own together. I don't know that you need to. I mean, there's APIs now that you could go to your own data set and stuff like that, but just use, you know, DAX Studio to go against your own. Use this to have the integrated learning environment. All right, so the result of this summarized column from our measure up here, we look, what we're doing is we're producing a percent of all sales. And so we're coming in here and we're getting the measure of sales amount, and we're getting the value of all sales. And again, it's calculating sales amount, but it's removing all filters from sales. And then it's just simply doing the divide of category sales against all sales. So in this context, when we're showing a category and we're showing the year and it's 0.34%, well, that really isn't correct because all the filters were removed from sales. In this case, not just category and year, or not just category, but category and year. So in this, to show this correctly within the year, we'd want to get that filter back again. So if we go to what was their figure 518, sorry for the slowness, I could have had that up already.
No worries.
What we'll see is he introduced his first method of doing that. Is we have the exact same calculation. We're removing all the filters off of sales, but applying back the filter for whatever's coming from date year. So in our summarized columns, in this example here, Now we see we have 0.91%. And I believe when I read through that part of the book, they were saying, yeah, that's the value that we wanted, right? And you see this just goes through everything that's in there. So that's cool. So now we know that we could give a better result to our users, right, by having this filtered down to the year. And then what piqued my interest in reading that book at the top of that page, they said, well, later on, we'll talk about how to do this again with all selected. So that is in the same link I sent out to you. We'll do this one more time. And this is a much simpler measure that they put together. So they just did, you know, we could have done more variables like they did before, but I think this is what they actually have in the back of that chapter 5. I don't remember the page that it's on. I'll have to mark that down at some point. But they did all selected, which again, we can come in here and read. Returns all the rows in the table or the values in a column, ignoring any filters that might have been applied inside the query, but keeping filters that come from outside. Sounds kind of complicated. So we could say, we give it a table, which is optional, and it says remove all the filters on the specified table or column. So it's going to remove the filter for product category, but it's going to keep the filters for year in this case. So that's what this all selected is telling us to do in this little complicated way of saying it. And so we see we get the exact same results, 0.91. And if I go back to this one, that was 0.91. Where on the very first one, it was 0.34 because it was dividing for the full amount for all categories, all years. So we now, you know, see that we could write this just a little bit different. I gave this same presentation just a little while ago, and somebody said, couldn't you just use remove filter there? I don't know. Let's try it. Did remove filters. Put in that extra parenthesis for me just to try to throw me a curveball there, but I think that's for the calculate. Yeah, so we're good. And so now if we run this, we get the same result again. This is another reason why, like whenever we're on live streams and or people are asking questions and you hear the "it depends" quite a bit.
Yes, it really does.
There's so many ways to do the same thing.
Yes.
In DAX, and you know, just like what you know, our heroes at SQL PI tell us, test it. Also test maybe the performance is going to be a little bit different.
Yes.
I also want to bet that remove filters came out, or maybe they just did this in that part of the chapter because they weren't ready to introduce this yet.
Yeah.
But just having that question in that last session gave me a nut. This makes a whole lot more sense to me than the previous one with all selected. Just whatever it is with all selected doesn't totally stick in my brain yet.
Yeah.
But remove filters to me makes more sense.
I think that's kind of reason why they introduced the remove filters function in general, is because people were getting hung up on the naming schema, or you know, how I have to do all, and actually all's removing everything. Like there's a context thing that I think they actually made another function, and there's probably some voodoo underneath the hood here that's like, okay, well, we're just using remove filters. What that's just doing is like, you know, an all with something else on there, some other code that's happening behind the scenes there.
Yeah,
that was by far the number one thing that my head got wrapped around the axle in when I was learning DAX. Like just all or all selected or yes, that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, so to me this was a great little example because
all
it was
except
quick data to see that we get the same values, and you know. All right, I do have one more. Yes. Honestly, I've never walked through this one before.
Let's try some thin ice. Ooh. Let's go.
I love it. Let's do it live.
Let's do it live. We like living on the edge here.
So they Alberto came out with a video. And I have the YouTube link here, but I don't have a way to get to it. But it was this all accept versus all. I'm going to make my screen, sorry, I'm going to have to make it just a little bit smaller so I could see some of this.
No
so
problem. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, but he walked through a very complicated video about what was going on here. And like I said, I haven't read this for a little while. So let's see if we could think about what's happening here. We have our remove filters. We have an all accept. Let me look at the results. You can see there's 6 different queries in here.
Oh my goodness.
And as I went through his video, and I think Dan mentioned, Dan, if you remember what that is, maybe you could key us in the comments what the video was, because you meant when you and I talked about it, you were talking about how normally the code is there in the blog post, and it was, but it didn't have the try me on it. But what I did is I went through and grabbed their code. I think I actually wrote this by hand. I was bored one night. My wife goes out. We could get into that during half an hour.
That's what I do. When I'm bored, I write DAX code.
Yeah. What else are you going to do?
All right. Might as well learn something while we're at it.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sorry. Like I said, I haven't looked at this for a while, and I haven't refreshed myself on exactly what it's doing. But it's in that link for you guys, and I'll add the article to the link. It'll automatically show up
Perfect.
in that Toby.
Yeah.
But it shows a couple more things. These roll-up add is subtotals. You see this function a whole lot in Power BI because it's adding subtotals for when you have a total like in a matrix or whatever. It's used quite a bit. Well, I wish I remember what this really was all for. And so he did go through on a query where it's showing incorrect percent with state.
Yep.
And then.
Oh, I think I have the article here. Yeah.
You found it?
Yeah, I think I found it. It's the article of, I think, using all accept versus all and values. So yeah, the all and values function. I think this is Alberto Ferrari going through the video. Does that sound right?
It was him. It was definitely him.
Yeah, so I have the using all accept item. I have the using remove filter values in the examples he gives. Percent over continent. Is he using continents in here? Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think this is it. I found it.
Yep. Yeah, because then in query 5, it's continent removed incorrect compared to query 2.
Yep, exactly.
And then and here we get a correct result. Let's see. And what we'd have to look at is each one of these, this is the one thing that makes it a little bit hard is like you can see I'm using percent over continents 3.
Yep.
So now I have to scroll all the way back up and find that in my define section.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. So that this is the measure that's being used in query 6.
Gotcha.
And just the different ways that he was putting everything together. But if you really wanted to understand this video, like I said, you could go through and freeze it at a certain point, come here, because the point that I was trying to really make with this is in their books, in their videos, they're using this database that they put out here on DAX.do. If they're not using the Contoso one, they're using the DAX.guide. I did happen to catch a video that they did the other day, and he immediately disclaimed that they weren't using their standard one.
Okay.
But it was a very small, like a single table. He was trying to show something unique. So I think they tend to let you know if they're not using it. So
and that makes sense. That way you can kind of, I mean, it's in their best advantage is to use as much of these standard data sets as possible. In one area, these guys are stinking smart when they have 2 data sets that can produce all this documentation they have about every little thing. Like they have so many use cases of filter context, transitions, all this, like so much of this stuff. And you're thinking, how in the world do they do all that? And they only have 2 databases. They put a lot of time into make sure in these data sets were like complete enough to do exactly what they wanted to explain.
I'm right there with you. every time that I think about it, I get more and more amazed about how good they are with everything.
Yeah.
And again, just how open they are with everything,
Yeah.
right? I know they do great with their training, but their training is top notch. They should get it. And I had somebody doing training for me at a client the other day, and we brought up one of their recent class, and
Yep.
it was what, $300 to $400, and we talked about the value of that.
Yeah.
Compared to what it cost. I mean, when you look at it, it's cheap. Not that I'm an advertisement for them, but
same here. I don't get paid for advertising for SQL BI and their video stuff, but like, shoot, man. I mean, there's nothing second to none. I mean, if you're really getting into DAX and you're really trying to learn what's going on here, these guys are top notch, high quality training. And I actually have on my list, they're going to come around and do when the pandemic is over, they're actually going to try and get back out and go round to people again and start, knocking on doors and doing in-person events. I'm going to do it now just because I want to dedicate a day of time just to kind of sit down with them in a room and just let them go and just trying to absorb as much as I can as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
So good.
So that's all I have.
Awesome.
Come back and reuse this one, if you want to watch that video or read that article.
Sure.
But again, as I was reading, I can't say I've done what a lot of others did on the DAX, the definitive guide to DAX, and I've read it cover to cover.
Yep.
But when I read it the first couple times, right, I kept struggling because I felt I had to bring open their PBIX files and everything else. But now that I know that I could come get one of their examples, even if I type it in, when I'm doing the physical act of typing it, makes me understand it a whole lot more, right? The same thing as if you were writing it down. So use this to help you, study from the book and then apply those concepts to yourself. I hope this was useful. I was glad that I could present it.
I'm floored. This is absolutely amazing. So I'll transition back here to the three of us screen. So here I'll jump over to all three of us again. I'm floored. Again, I have fun. Like, I enjoy presenting. I actually love more of other people presenting because I can sit back and chill and press buttons on my little screen and things switch. But I can learn something. I can sit here and I'm like, you're saying things. You should see my browser tab right now. I have got probably about like 40 browser tabs. I've just been like nonstop scouring all the links that you were sending out. So I've got all those captured. I'll have those available. I've been tweeting them out and putting them on the chat channel. So it's going to be it'll have sent all the links through the chat on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And what I'll try and do is I'm trying to capture all the links that are relevant here and then adding them to the description of the video for people who are watching this after the fact, that these will be down links in description below, as what everyone says on YouTube. Great. Awesome.
Yeah. Either way, Kevin, just phenomenal job, man. Really, really happy that you joined us tonight. Invitation wide open anytime you want to come back. Level of detail, explanation, just really in depth. I think great presentation. I hope the listeners and viewers all got the same level of detail, the explanation and insights into not only DAX.do, but just some great walkthroughs of DAX in general. And your presentation style, fantastic, and a lot of the same sentiments in the chat channel as well. So we really appreciate you coming out tonight and sharing what you know with the audience.
Well, like I said, I appreciate it. I enjoyed it. So the more I do this, the more comfortable I get as well. So I appreciate you guys having me. And
anytime,
like I said earlier, I got to see a little magic behind the scenes of what happens here.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I've captured all the links. The links will be in the description of this video. Right now, we're going to transition away from the presentation part of our user group. If you are online and watching and you want to just argue with Seth and myself and Kevin, we're more than happy to have you come argue with us or debate or talk about things. We just enjoy this part. We do a happy hour now. So what I will do is I actually have the link already here in front of me. I will copy the link and I'll put it here on all the social medias. So join us on the happy hour. And I'll just drop the link in there. And then with that, I will fire up my Teams and open up the meeting. And you'll probably hang out in the lobby just for a moment while we close down this session and we jump into the happy hour area. So thank you all very much. Kevin, really appreciate your time today. Wonderful presentation. Top notch. Well, looking forward to chatting with you in a little bit more on happy hour. And we'll have to get you back for another kind of like little, dive on some some articles around DAX. I think this was really good, very helpful.
Anytime. Are you going to put that link in our chat as well? Because I don't have the other stuff open.
Yeah, which link were you referring? Oh yeah, I'll put that
for
one
the
there.
happy
Yep,
hour.
I got it right there. It's just a little bit.ly link right there, and I'll put it in the chat window so you can jump on there as well. I also sent out a meeting invite to Seth and Kevin yourself as well, just so you could have it in your inbox, just in case it's in your Outlook as well. And with that, thank you all very much for attending, and we'll see you next month.